Again, I'm your host, Nathan Mathisen, and today I'm going to be talking all things Husky football. For Washington this week, the key was a number of different things. They succeeded at a number of different things on the day. One thing about Washington was through the first few weeks, they struggled on offense for sure. And they struggled not just running the ball and not just passing the ball, but at all the phases of offense, I guess you could say. And what happened against Cal was a tale of two tapes, you could say. Against Cal in the first half, Washington was clicking on all cylinders on offense, really. I mean, they put up 21 points against Cal. They had big chunk plays they were getting good running plays, not as often, but they would still have little pops for 5 yards here and there. But the majority of their offense in the first half of the game came on those chunk plays. And so what changed from the first half to the second half, I'm not sure, as there was a clear difference in the performance on the field. In the first half, just an example, Devin Culp in the first half, who was starting at tight end in place of K. Doughton, because K. Doughton was out due to COVID-19 protocols. Devin Culp had a great first half. He had 4 catches for 71 yards. In the second half, he only added 1 more catch. So he kind of disappeared. They stopped looking his way. And overall, the Husky offense kind of went back to what they were doing against Montana and what they were doing against Michigan. That's what they did in the second half. In the first half, it was what they were doing against Arkansas State. Throwing the ball more, kind of running a more creative playbook. And then they got that lead. They were up a couple scores. Next thing you know, you go to the second half and the play calling seems to have stagnated. They seem to rely more on that run game on first and second down. And the run game, of course, didn't work. It's weird when the Huskies have continuously tried this in every game. Just the simple handoffs off the guard's outside shoulder or inside of the guard. These inside run plays have not worked for Washington. They haven't worked all year long, yet they keep trying the same thing over and over again. For Washington in the first half, they didn't do those inside run plays as often, or even if they were doing them, they kind of got away with that as they were able to connect on big chunk plays. There were multiple 20-plus yard catches had, and when you're able to do that as a team, when you're able to get a first down with one play, get a big chunk play of that magnitude, it just helps the offense get in rhythm. And that's what the offense was in the first half. They were in rhythm. Now, come the second half, they lost that rhythm. They got out of sync. They weren't hitting on pass plays. I mean, I remember watching the game, there were a number of instances where during the play, I saw an open receiver only for Dylan Morris not to see him and throw somewhere else where it ended up being incomplete. Or if it was complete, it wasn't for as big of a gain had he thrown to the other guy. And, you can't all put that on Dylan Morris, I guess, because some of it simply is the reads, what he's supposed to be looking at. So, for instance, if you've got 2 players running slant routes, one low, one high, one on the outside, one in the slot running from, and Morris's first read is the outside guy, and the outside guy beats his corner off the line of scrimmage. Probably 95% of quarterbacks out there would throw the ball to the first guy, even if that guy in the slot happens to be even more wide open, as he can't bank on that. He has to go with his first read if he's open, because if he doesn't, and say the slot guy's covered up, then you've just ruined the play. You've missed out on an opportunity. So for Dylan Morris, sometimes that was the case. It was his reads, I think, that really cost him. Yet other times, I think it was just him not being able to move through his reads at a good progression. As there were instances where his first read was covered up, he wouldn't be able to get through the rest of his progression as he'd kind of get a little jittery in the pocket and start moving around. Sometimes he'd scramble forward and it'd be a good game. But overall, Morris isn't a scrambler. Morris isn't a guy who is going to be running a lot. So that's one thing I note, just Morris working on progression through his reads. And that's something that he'll get better at as the season moves on. As for the rest of the difference in the halves, one thing is just the defense. In the first half, the defense was very good. I mean, they allowed 10 points. And one of those was the field goal at the end of the half. Overall, the Huskies defense came in with the mindset of stopping Cal's run. And they did that. They stopped Cal's run. They limited Cal's running back Damian Moore to, I believe, 68 yards on 18 carries. He came into the game averaging over 5 yards a carry. So the Husky defense really stepped up their game and really slowed him down, especially in the first half. There were very few, if any, long breakaway runs that Cal managed in the first half. In the second half, though, it was kind of a different story. It wasn't necessarily Cal's running back that made the plays, that made the big runs, but it was their quarterback, Chase Garbers. And that's been an issue for the Huskies defense in the past against running quarterbacks, not having the best of contain. And it was an issue again against Garbers. In the first half, Garbers didn't run that much. In the second half, he started, I guess, trying to force things, or not force things, but he realized they were down and he needed to make a play. His receivers weren't working for him. They weren't playing the best maybe, and he put the ball in his hands. And he would run with it. If he didn't see his first or second option, more often than not, he would tuck the ball and find a running lane, as they were almost always there. As good as the Huskies' defensive line played against the running back in pass rush situations, they were leaving holes for Garbers to sneak through and for Garbers to break away on long runs. Like, he had a run for his long was 23 yards. Those are big killers to a defense when you feel like you played great coverage, yet next thing you know, you see the quarterback breaking through. And of course, the Huskies didn't have a spy on him or anything, so he would easily get to the second level of defense. So that's something Washington's definitely going to have to work on. But overall, Washington did play a good game. And I think there were more positives in this game than there were negatives. And that kind of transitions into grading the team's performance. Now, it was a good performance. I think the team did good. But there weren't anyone or any position group that really stood out, that really excelled, like you could say. So I'm not handing out any A's. No position group got an A today. I know, no A's, but there were a handful of guys who were just good. They got B's, a few C's, but overall, it was good grading-wise for the Huskies. At the quarterback position for Dylan Morris, I handed him out a B. I mean, he played a good game, I think. He was 19 for 32, 234 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And no interceptions, which is huge. He had kind of an interception issue to start the year, throwing 5 interceptions in 3 games. And today against Cal, he still took deep shots, which is good. I want to see him continue to do that, as the big plays are huge for an offense like the Huskies, who can struggle at times. He took the deep shots, but he didn't throw any interceptions. He didn't have any plays where he just missed or didn't see a Cal defender and throw it right to him like he did against Michigan. So that's huge for him. And he did enough. He did enough for Washington to win. That's what I've always thought of Dylan Morris as. Not a knack on him or a knock on him necessarily, but he's someone who will do enough to get your team over the hump and get your team the victory. And that's exactly what he did against Cal. When they needed him to throw a touchdown, he did. He threw 2 touchdowns. He was able to convert on third downs. He was able to make key passes. He played one of his better games, I think. He played probably his best game of the year, I would say. I mean, maybe the Arkansas State game, but you got to take into account the inferior opponent there. So Cal definitely was his best game so far, up to the level of competition. And that's about it with him. He can continue to improve. He definitely has room to go from this game. But moving on to the running backs, they were tough. I gave them a C. I mean, looking at their numbers, it might be more like a C minus, D plus, if I'm being completely honest, as they didn't show up often. In total, the Huskies ran for only 92 yards. Not what you want to see. Washington wants to run the ball more. And Cal did a good job of stopping the run. Of note, McGrew, he played pretty well. He actually got the start. The Washington fans loved seeing him out there. McGrew is one of the fan favorites, and they gave him big cheers out there. But McGrew, he wasn't able to get that breakaway run that he'll usually have. McGrew is usually good for 2 runs a game of 10 plus yards, and he didn't have that. His long on the day was 6 yards. Again, McGrew did have 2 touchdowns, so he was doing something right. He was also doing very good through the Wildcat, but it's always interesting seeing Washington line up in that formation with McGrew back there. As in this game, they did it at one point. I think they did it 3 plays in a row, maybe 2 plays in a row in the goal line. And every time when Washington's done that, it's been the exact same thing in McGrew just taking it himself. I do not know if Washington has ever, I don't think this year for sure they haven't, but I don't know when the last time it was that Washington's Wildcat back hands the ball to the motion man. I don't know if they've done it this last year. I don't know if they did it the year before. Maybe it was back with Dante Pettis running it. That was the last time. So it seems as though it's very predictable, yet it still works. So if it's still working, then keep doing it. But I'm sure eventually Lake's going to do it where he has the guy handed off to the guy in motion, and it's going to go for a big play. But overall, besides McGrew, none of the backs really stepped up. You had Kamari Pleasant with 4 carries for 17 yards. Cam Davis, 5 carries for 15 yards. And then Richard Newton did not appear. He did not get a carry. He was on the sidelines. I don't know if he ever got in the game. I don't recall. But he didn't touch the ball. And I don't know what it is, as he started the first 3 games and now doesn't touch the ball, which it's very reminiscent of last year when Newton was balling out for the first 2 games of the week or the year, and then the last 2 he didn't step on the field. I don't know if the same thing happened again or what. I'm not going to speculate, but just something to keep an eye on. As for the wide receivers, I graded them I gave them a B+. I think in the first half, like I mentioned, Devin Culp played great. 4 catches, 71 yards in the first half. 5 catches, 81 yards on the day. And all his catches were big too. He had 5 catches. All 5 were for a first down. 2 of those, one of those was on a 3rd down. 1 was on a 4th down. So Devin Culp really did take over the role of K-Don, of being Dylan Morris's safety blanket, and that was huge. Jimmy Lake talked about after in the press conference about how Washington has a bunch of plays, as we all know, drawn up for that tight end position. And with Otten gone, Westover gone, it was the Culp show. And Culp was able to step into that role and replace those tight ends perfectly. He did his job. He made the plays. He ran them perfectly, got the ball a lot of times, more than he ever had before. I mean, going into this game, he had 3 catches in his career. Two came from this year. One against Montana, one against Michigan. I know he got one in Michigan. I don't know if the other one was Arkansas State or Montana, but anyways, so he had like no catches on his career. He actually it took 15 games of him playing until he got his first catch. So this was a big breakout game for Devin Culp, and I think he's capable of doing this even with Gabe Dawn. I think he's able to be a great receiving tight end, and he's also a big body, 250 pounds. So he's earned his role in this offense, and so we'll see if he continues to play at level. But moving on, I think I might have a little sound problem, but I'm just going to keep going through it, figure it out for next week's, try and fix it. But for the offensive line for Washington, I believe they played not their best game, maybe better than they had been playing. But again, with the rushing game struggling, and you can't really give them too good of a grade. I ended up giving them a B- just because they protected Dylan Morris very well. I mean, I believe Cal had 1 sack on the day, so the offensive line did a good job in pass protection. There weren't too many stupid penalties that I recall. And so overall, just a B- for them. Good in the pass protection. Again, not very good in the running game. Moving on to the defensive side of things, you got the D-line. I'll give them a B+. I mean, they played good. They played good against the run game, like I said above or before. They held the running back for Cal to 68 yards. Yes, they didn't fill the gaps quick enough, but were quick enough for Chase Garbers to stop him in the second half. But overall, they got pressure on Garbers, which was huge. Washington had 3 sacks. That's something they need to continue to do, get pressure on these quarterbacks so that they don't have the time to make the passes, or if they make the passes, they might be a little rushed. It's when you're rushing the opposing team, it's more prone to turnovers. So overall, B- for the defensive line. Next up, we got the linebackers, give them a B+. As again, they're kind of similar with the defensive line. Run game, they did great. They made plays. They did good in blitzes, causing pressure. And overall, just a solid for the linebackers. As for the defensive backs, they're also going to be in that B range. They're getting I'll give them a B+, actually. I had a B down, but a B+. Yes, Garbers threw for 319 yards. He was 30 of 41, so he had a very efficient game, big game passing. He threw 2 passing touchdowns, but he also threw 2 interceptions. I know Buki, he got a sack too. The defensive back came in, got a sack on the quarterback. Kyler Gordon played an outstanding game. He's going to be obviously one of the guys who shined. But overall, the defensive backs played a great game. They didn't allow too many big plays, or if they did, I was talking about this with someone, how Kyler Gordon played such a great game, but he did allow a number of catches. But then with each of those catches, the receiver never ran for anything after. So if he allowed a catch for 15 yards, the receiver would be tackled right there, which, yes, it's still a big play, but just limiting the run after catch is huge. Special teams. This one, as I was thinking about it, I'm going to move it down to more of a D+. Peyton Henry needs to step his game up for sure for Washington. He was 1 for 2, missed key field goal against Cal. And the punting game for Washington wasn't anything special. Yes, he had some long ones. I mean, Race Porter 4 for 222 yards, so 55.5 average. But he didn't have any inside the 20. So he didn't ever really pin Cal back deep. And some of that's not his fault, as obviously Washington wasn't punting from an area where he could pin him back deep. But overall, just a not the best game for the special teams. More lies on the inability for Peyton Henry to hit kicks with consistency. Now, getting on to the next topic is just who disappointed, and that transitions perfectly with Peyton Henry. Again, he's never been the best of kickers. He's seems to have struggled with his career at Washington, and I don't know if the Huskies just can't seem to find a better place kicker than Henry. He was 1 for 2 today. He doesn't have the biggest leg out there, and he's not the most accurate kicker. You want your kicker to be able to kick it long, and you want your kicker to be able to be accurate. Peyton Henry isn't that. That's all I'm going to say on him. He disappointed 1 for 2. Other disappointments, there weren't many individuals, I guess, who I could spot out. I guess Jackson Sermon, just a guy, I noticed he missed a couple of tackles on big plays. He missed it on the Damian Moore touchdown. He took a bad angle, I believe, on that little swing route and wasn't able to get him out of bounds, allowing that touchdown to happen. He also got juked out a couple times, I saw, on the interior. So he didn't play the best. Then, I mean, you could look at the running backs again falling flat, like I mentioned above, not really breaking anything big. You're looking at it, the long run for the running backs was 8 yards. Kamari Pleasant, he had one run at 8 yards. That was the longest run by a running back. And again, mentioning those big plays, chunk plays is what can make an offense electric, and that's why the Husky offense isn't electric. They don't get chunk plays. It's as simple as that. Now, moving on to who shined. Who shined, obviously, we're starting with Kyler Gordon. He played a heck of a game, even though, like I mentioned, he had a few drops, or not drops. He had a few times when the receiver was left open, but each time he would be right there on him to make the tackle after the catch. And not necessarily that the receiver was never wide open on him. It was often a case of just a perfect pass by Chase Garbers to get it to the receiver, as Gordon was usually right on the hip of the receiver, so he'd make the tackle right away. And sometimes just the quarterbacks, if they're good enough, they can make those plays. You'd need perfect coverage at all times, and Gordon didn't do that, obviously, as the receiver got a bit of separation. But for the most part, he played great. He had a number of huge plays. Just off the stat sheets, you see the 2 interceptions. Huge plays. All of them were really just key. Every turnover is a key momentum builder or a shift in momentum depending on what's going on in the game. But it wasn't just the interceptions for Kyler Gordon, it was his tackling ability. In the game, he had 10 total tackles, 9 solo tackles, which, again, usually when a defensive back has that many tackles, it points towards a number of catches being allowed. But just some of the importance in the tackles for Kyler Gordon, he had earlier in the game it was either I think it was a third down, or it might have been a second down, can't exactly remember, but in goal to go inside the 10-yard line, Kyle ran a slant route, and the guy caught it, but Gordon stopped him at the 2. So he held him up from scoring. And later on, Gordon made that huge play on the little screen pass to stop the Cal receiver again from getting the first down. So just great form tackling Gordon was doing all game long. And that's why he gets the shout out here, not just for his turnovers he got, but his form tackling he made, and just being a defensive back who's hungry to head up and stop the run or just stop the receiver in his tracks on like that screen pass. Another guy who shined, like I mentioned above, Devin Culp. Big shout out for him. He he was kind of thrown into the starting lineup. I'm not entirely sure how much notice, but I believe they said K-Don practiced all week pretty much. So it was obviously he wasn't like completely ready, I guess you could say, or he didn't know he was going to be starting until very soon. And he took it in stride. I mean, he was the safety blanket for Dylan Morris the first half. He was making huge plays. He had a number of 20 plus receptions. So he played great. He gets a shout out there for sure. I mean, that's about it, I think, for the major guys who shined. I guess Michelle Powell, he played great in place of Trent McDuffie, another case for like Culp, who had to step in for Otten. Powell had to come in for McDuffie, who got injured at last week's game in the third quarter on a punt return. McDuffie got injured. Powell stepped into that game, played great, didn't allow too many big plays really. And again, against Cal, he may have been on error in I believe one of Cal's early touchdowns. There was kind of a possible, or it was a third down conversion where there seemed to be a coverage mix-up on that side of the ball, but I don't know what exactly happened there, so can't put it all on Powell. But overall, he did good. I mean, like I said, Cal didn't hit too many big plays. But now getting into the final topic, moving on from Cal and going to Oregon State. Going to Corvallis, who last year, Washington, Oregon State was a very close game, with Washington narrowly escaping that one with a victory. And I think this week against Oregon, let me pull up Oregon State here. Against Oregon State, it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be a very close game. And Oregon State, I mean, they've looked really good so far on the year. They don't have that running back from last year that caused every team in the Pac-12 huge issues, but they're still a running team. Against USC in their huge win, I remember hearing a stat. It was like Oregon State's first win in the Coliseum or at USC in a huge, in like decades or something like that. I thought I heard someone say. So Oregon State's definitely going to be riding a high. They're feeling themselves, and they are a team that Washington needs to look out for as their running team. And that's what, even with Cal's, or even with UW's good performance against Cal's run defense, just one good performance, I don't think, proves to me that they're capable of doing that each week. Against Cal, it's going to be a huge test, as on the year, or against Oregon State has 902 or 904 rushing yards, led by BJ Baylor, who has been balling out. He's got 422 rushing yards. Against USC, he had 158 yards on the ground. So it's going to be clear that Oregon State's going to try and run the ball. Like all teams probably will against Washington, try to run the ball. And if they're able to find success running the ball, then Washington's going to be in for a long night. But I think that Washington, again, has enough talent that their offense, especially their offense, has been clicking of late, like I've mentioned. And their offense will once again, I think Oregon State doesn't have necessarily a great defense. They don't have a bad defense by any standards, but it's not the best of defenses. And I think Washington is able to find some momentum in this game again. Washington and Oregon State are both coming into this game feeling good about themselves. Both 1-0 in conference play. Both looking for the Pac-12 championship. So they're both coming in with momentum. I feel confident, though, in Washington's offense. That's something weird. I didn't think I'd say that I'm confident in Washington's offense, but I am. I think they figured it out. I think they're going to once again have a good offensive showing against Oregon State. And I think Washington's going to come out on top. Let's give the score prediction. Let's go 31 again. 31 to 27. 31-27. I think Washington comes out on top. It's another close game. Washington, I think every game Washington's in this year from now on, it's going to be a close game. And just this week against Oregon State and Corvallis, they're going to come out on top, 31-27. But that is about all I have for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry about the sound issues. I'll try and figure that out. But until next time, this has been Husky Dash. Make sure to follow Dash Sports TV on Twitter, on YouTube, TikTok, I believe. We're on any social media. Check out Dash Sports TV. This has been it for me. Once again, I'm Nathan Mathisen. This has been Husky